Okay, this video is going to talk about the consumption possibilities curve. And so that's an important thing because to be able to see the gains from trade and international gains from trade, when we have international trade, we have to say something about prices. So I first want to think about what the consumption possibilities curve is going to look like, and then we're going to think about how to interact with the production possibilities curve. If you've ever taken microeconomics, if you've taken enough microeconomics to learn about something called a budget line, if you've taken the intermediate microeconomics, you've heard about budget lines undoubtedly. The consumption possibilities curve is just a budget line, so you can think of it that way if you want. And what I want to do here is, first off, let's think about how this budget line or consumption possibilities curve might look. And it's easier if you start by thinking about, well, what if you're a consumer and you have two goods that you can choose between, smoothies and energy drinks. And let's just say that you have $30 to spend this month or this week on these two goods. Energy drinks, the price of energy drinks are $3, the price of smoothies are $6, and you want to think about what combinations of smoothies and energy drinks can you consume? Well, what are your possibilities? That's what the consumption possibilities curve is, also what the budget line shows. What can you afford? What are the consumption possibilities here? So one way to think about it is, suppose you wanted to spend all of your budget on energy drinks. How many energy drinks could you buy? Well, with a budget of $30 and a price per energy drink of $3, you'd simply take your income, $30, divided by the price of the energy drinks, and that tells you how many energy drinks you can afford when you buy them. All energy drinks. That's 10. So you'd come up here, and you know that the consumption, your budget line or consumption possibilities curve would have an intercept on the energy drinks axis of 10 energy drinks. And since you spent all of your money on energy drinks, by definition, you have 0 smoothies. Then you could also ask, well, what if you spent all of your money on smoothies? How many smoothies could you buy? Well, again, you take the budget of $30, divide by the price of smoothies at $6 a piece. That works out to be 5. So that would tell us here that if you spent all of your money on smoothies, you could buy 5 smoothies, and then again, necessarily 0 energy drinks. You spend everything you had on smoothies. So those would be the two possibilities. And not surprisingly, then, since each smoothie costs $6, each energy drink costs $3, the consumption possibilities curve here in this case would be linear. It's got a negative slope to it. Don't worry about the negative slope, but it's got a negative slope to it. And that's necessary because if you're spending all your money up here on energy drinks and you want to buy a smoothie, you have to buy fewer energy drinks to be able to afford a smoothie. And then if you notice this, because we have 10 and 5 as the prices here, the slope of this curve would be 2. Don't worry about the negative sign there, it's negative 2. But it would be 2, and if you look at that, that's also 6 divided by 3. And so it would turn out that the consumption possibilities curve, the slope of it, it'll be a line, and it will have the slope will be based on the prices of these two goods. Now, in this example, I'm using actual dollar prices. In the book, when we're covering this, you usually just think of the price of one good in terms of the other. But I think in making this clear, seeing where it's coming from here, let's start by using some dollar prices. All right, so now we're coming down here. Here's our international trade example. We've got one nation, and we're graphing its production possibilities curve here. And let's just suppose if they produce all bread, they can produce 50 units of bread, or then they can produce 20 units of steel. And of course, when they produce all steel, they've got no bread. And if they all bread, they have no steel. So we have this here. And now what we want to do is ask the question that if this country faced a consumption possibilities frontier in international trade, what would their we want to ask, what point here along this curve would actually give the producers of these goods in the country the maximum profit. So that's what we're trying to get at. Let's think about profit. It turns out, in this case here, we can ignore costs and just worry about revenue. Because if you're microeconomics, you know we said profit is revenue minus cost. It turns out that, in effect, the cost of all of these points along the production possibilities curve are the same because we're using all of the country's resources in this case. So whatever the cost of the resource would be, that is the cost here. So you could just focus on revenue. So what we want to price out here is think about, let's suppose that the prices of these goods would be, in international trade, would be $500 for steel. Each unit of steel can sell for $500, and then each unit of bread could sell for $100. And we can think of these as dollar prices. It's easier to do here with dollars. And then what we could ask is, well, let's consider some different points along this production possibilities curve and ask how much revenue or how much profit would you get if you were one firm and you had these production possibilities for yourself. Which of these points along the curve would give you the most revenue and hence the most profit facing these prices for steel and bread? Well, it's actually pretty easy. All you'd have to do is apply these prices to the different quantities. So what you do is you'd be doing the price of steel times the quantity of steel plus the price of bread times whatever quantity of bread you have. And that's going to give you revenue. So if we start with this point up here where you're producing all bread, we said the price of steel is 500. But you produce no steel, and then the price of bread is 100, and you're producing 50 units of bread. That would work out to $5,000. We could also have a point here in the middle because, if this line is linear, the PPC here is linear. We know that the quantities in the middle here would be half of each, so 25 and 50. So now we could do that the price of steel is 500, and now at this point in the middle, we're producing 10 units of steel. Now 100 times now only 25 units of bread, and we would get $7,500 here. This is just calculator math, so if you don't follow, just pause later and put those numbers into the calculator on your phone. You get this. And then the third point would be down here where we've got no bread but 20 units of steel. 500 is the price of steel. And now we've got 20 steel. 100 is the price of bread. No bread. And that would work out to 10,000. So if you were a producer and you could produce, and you were the one firm and you could use this production possibilities curve to describe your ability to produce goods and you wanted to maximize profit, well, you make 5,000 here, 7,500 here, 10,000 here. 10,000 is the best, so you would produce down here at this point with all steel. Now, if you want to think about graphically what's happening here, I said up here that up here is that when you have a consumption possibilities curve, the slope is the ratio of the prices. It's actually the ratio of the price of this good here in the numerator. So the slope of this consumption possibilities frontier would happen to be 5. And then the slope of this PPC, if you want to calculate, it's 50 and 20. That would end up to be 2.5. There's negative signs there again, but again, don't worry about that. So the slope of the PPC is 5. This is PPC is 2.5. CPC is 5. And then what we can see is the CPC is steeper than the production possibilities curve. And that's true, then the firm, to maximize profit, would want to produce down here. This is what's most profitable. Is more profitable than this point here, and even more profitable than this point here. So what we can see is that if a nation faces a consumption possibilities curve that is steeper than their production possibilities curve when they get to international trade. They want to point, and they have a linear PPC, you'd be down here. And then if it's flatter than the PPC, you'd want to be up here and produce all bread. And that's good. That's how we're going to end up getting specialization for the law of comparative advantage. You get it out of the behavior of the firms that are producing these goods. They're going to maximize profit. They want to maximize profit, and they will respond to the prices available in international trade by specializing accordingly based on a comparative advantage. So that's important here. One last thing I'll just mention, because we use this and talk about this and try to, in chapter 3, trying to talk about what the range of prices would have to be. If this nation was an autarky, and remember, autarky means there's no international trade. With autarky, this nation would have to produce whatever they want to consume. If this nation would like to consume both some steel and bread, if they would like to consume both of these goods, then the producers in this country, the firms in this country that produce steel and bread, would have to be willing to produce both bread and steel. What does that mean about the prices? Well, it would turn out that the consumption possibilities curve, or most importantly, the prices in this nation, if this nation was an autarky, would have to be the same as the slope of their production possibilities curve. Nothing else would work. If the prices internally in autarky were such that the CPC was steeper, the producers would all want to be down here and produce only steel. They would not be willing to produce bread because they would be lowering their profit. If the CPC was flatter, then they'd be up here and the producers would be unwilling to produce steel. The only way in this nation, if this nation on its own, because it's not going to trade, in autarky, the only way that they can get both bread and steel produced, assuming that's what their consumers want to do, is that the CPC has to have the same slope as the PPC. So when you make arguments about like what the acceptable prices would have to be, what we're presuming is that the prices in autarky have to reflect the opportunity costs in each country based off of their PPC. That's just a little bit of a side point. It's more important to try to understand where it is we're getting from profit maximization that the country's going to specialize, because then that's what we can use to help see the benefits from international trade.